how do we know that the Bible is the Word of God? How do we know it's the Word of God? Well, we just accept that without any asking of questions. This is why liberal Christianity exists, right? Progressive modernism, whatever you want to call it. That's why it exists, because they don't believe the Bible's the Word of God. And so they can try to come up contrivances. You have to contrive a religion, a humanism. And I think that there are modern day theologians like Josh McDowell, New Evidence That Demands a Verdict, More Than a Carpenter, which is the real lightweight version of New Evidence That Demands a Verdict. They're great books. And I've looked at them. I had to read More Than a Carpenter when I was going through Bible classes, and they're helpful. But I would submit and I would build the case that they do not demonstrate that the Bible is the Word of God. What they do is they demonstrate that although the Bible has miracle stories in it, which most people who are of an atheistic and rationalistic bent would raise their eyebrow to, miracles? They demonstrate, Josh McDowell, More Than a Carpenter, Josh McDowell, New Evidence That Demands a Verdict, demonstrates that although the Bible has miracle stories in it, which are hard to swallow for a rationalistic anti-supernaturalist, nevertheless, the Bible is historically reliable, and oftentimes this line of thinking will lead people to the Gospel of Luke as the favorite book of the Bible, because the Gospel of Luke is written in such a manner, at least in the prologue starting out, where it really looks like it's written from a very careful, historically reliable style. Because I think it's the first or second chapter of Luke, who was a doctor, was writing in the time of Caesar Tiberius, right? A census and all this secular Roman Empire stuff going on. And so even though there's miracle stories like levitation and ascension, okay, and physical healings, okay, which is hard for a rationalistic, agnostic, skeptic, atheist to accept, the simple fact that naturalistic things like Caesar Tiberius is referred to, and places, dates, and times of a naturalistic and secular government political nature kind of lends credence to the atheistic academic with an anti-supernatural bias in his understanding of history. As long as miracle stories are not to be included, we can put it on History Channel. We can put it in a National Geographic book. As long as we suck all the supernatural stuff out of it and can comfortably call them legends, myths, and folklore, now we have history. And there's plenty of that in the Gospel of Luke. There's plenty of secular data in the Gospel of Luke where it kind of, even to a hypercritical, anti-supernatural, naturalistic historian could say, Luke's saying stuff in there that is not mystical in nature, stuff that honestly might qualify for an article in National Geographic. Well, how about that? And that's where the Josh McDowell material will lead you. It'll lead you to, oh, the Bible's the Word of God because Luke wrote of times and places and personages of a secular political nature, and so therefore the Bible's the Word of God. the Bible's the Word of God because some of the stuff in the Bible could actually end up on History Channel, and that means it's the Word of God. Or, and I say this with honor and respect to Josh McDowell and his ministry, or the Bible is the Word of God because we have hundreds of thousands of manuscripts of the New Testament that have survived, in comparison with the Iliad and the Odyssey, which is like basically none. So therefore, the New Testament is more reliable than Greek mythology. Therefore, it's the Word of God. Therefore, the New Testament has a lot of copies of it. And so therefore, because it has more copies than Greek mythology scriptures, it's the Word of God. After you spent 600, 700, 800 pages of Josh McDowell time, that's what you're going to come out with. That's what you're going to come out with believing. You're going to come out believing stuff about Suetonius, Tacitus, and Josephus, that non-Christian historians referred to Jesus. He was a real person. Okay, all right. So we've made some corrections here. We've made some corrections about some atheistic misconceptions, that just because there was miracle stories in the New Testament, that therefore that there are secular data in the New Testament that an atheist could come away with and say, okay, I can see why Jesus might have existed. Okay, I can see why Caesar Tiberius existed, and he lived in a time and a place and where there was political realities. Okay, this is something we can put into an article for the Journal of Biblical Literature or National Geographic, but that doesn't prove it's the Word of God, though. It wouldn't prove that to an atheist. I would submit to you that Lee Strobel and Josh McDowell have done the church a great service. But also, what have they done in focusing all of this energy on the historical reliability of the Bible? They've left people with the impression, this is how they've used it. Evidential apologetics, Josh McDowell, Lee Strobel. This is how they've used it. This is how people have used it. And this is not to discount their hard work. This is to say this is not sufficient to persuade a person into a genuine faith that the Bible is inspired, infallible, and inerrant. Something supernatural has to happen to that person. You can't just reason with people on a rationalist level and say, the Bible is historically reliable, and here's the reason why. Jesus is still floating on water, and Jesus is still flying up into the sky. There has to come a breaking point in the reasoning process where you're not just putting your faith in the Bible on the sole basis that it's historically reliable with a lot of ancient copyist documents. Oh, we have more documents of the New Testament, and so that means it's the Word of God. We have more documents of the New Testament than of any ancient writing. God has preserved His Word, therefore it's the Word of God. You would have never found any of the Protestant reformers saying such things. I don't know what they said, but they didn't say stuff like that. I can tell you that. They appealed to the testimony of God's Spirit at work in your heart, the born-again experience. It's the only thing that can enlighten and illuminate and bring revelation to your heart, the presence of God. And that is how you know the Bible is the Word of God. That is how you know it is inspired by that same Spirit that you just felt, heard, and experienced. You feel an affinity with the book. You feel, through the presence of that Spirit, a kinship with that book, and that is what gives you faith. that there is something living and active and breathing and sharper than any two-edged sword. That presence of God relationship between you and the Bible makes you believe it is the Word of God, makes you believe that it is the Ephesians 6:17 sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God.